They called him the blonde beast, the hangman, the man with the iron heart. Even Hitler called him the man with the iron heart, and Heinrich Himmler, one of history's most evil men, called him irreplaceable. Reinhard Heydrich was the architect of the Holocaust, the mastermind behind the final solution, and possibly the most dangerous Nazi who ever lived. So what did this cold-blooded killer actually do all day? How did a man orchestrate the murder of millions while maintaining the appearance of a cultured, intelligent officer? Was he a monster every waking moment, or did he hide his evil behind a mask of normalcy? Let's step into the chilling daily routine of the man who was too evil even by Nazi standards. Born in 1904 into a musical family, young Reinhard was a talented violinist who seemed destined for a career in music. But he was drawn to military life, joining the German Navy in 1922. His naval career ended in disgrace in 1931 when he was dismissed for misconduct. This humiliation pushed him toward the Nazi Party. He joined the SS in 1931 and quickly caught Heinrich Himmler's attention. Himmler recognized Heydrich's intelligence and complete lack of moral restraint, putting him in charge of building the SS intelligence service. By 1933, at only 29 years old, Heydrich was already one of the most powerful and feared men in Nazi Germany. Reinhard Heydrich woke up early every morning, typically around 6 in the morning. Unlike many Nazi leaders who indulged in excess, Heydrich was disciplined and athletic. He believed in physical fitness and maintaining peak condition. His morning routine started with exercise, calisthenics, stretching, and sometimes a run. He was tall, over 6 feet, with striking blonde hair and sharp features that the Nazis considered the perfect Aryan specimen. He took pride in his appearance and worked to maintain it. But here is something most people do not know. Heydrich was deeply insecure about his past. Rumors circulated, even within the Nazi Party, that he had Jewish ancestry. His grandmother's maiden name was Süß, and in the paranoid racist world of the Nazis, this was enough to raise questions. Heydrich spent his entire career haunted by these rumors, overcompensating with extreme cruelty and fanatical devotion to Nazi racial ideology. Some historians believe his insecurity about his own background drove him to become even more ruthless in persecuting Jews. After his morning exercise, Heydrich would shower, shave with meticulous care, and dress in his perfectly tailored SS uniform. Every detail had to be perfect. His boots polished to a mirror shine, his insignia positioned precisely, his appearance immaculate. He saw himself as the ideal Nazi officer, and he wanted everyone else to see him that way too. By 7:00 a.m., he would have breakfast with his wife Lena and their children. This is where the disturbing duality of Heydrich's life becomes apparent. He was a family man who played with his children, kissed his wife goodbye, and seemed like any other father heading off to work. But his work was organizing mass murder on an industrial scale. He could be a loving father at breakfast and sign death warrants for thousands by lunch without any apparent internal conflict. Heydrich was married in 1931, and by all accounts, his wife Lena was a devoted Nazi herself. She supported his career, shared his ideology, and raised their children in the Nazi worldview. They had 4 children together, and Heydrich seemed to genuinely love them. He would take time on weekends to play with them, read to them, and involve himself in their lives. He wanted to be seen as a good father, a family man who embodied Nazi values of strong family ties and Aryan breeding. This ability to compartmentalize is one of the most disturbing aspects of Heydrich's character. How does someone kiss their children goodbye in the morning and then spend the day planning the murder of other people's children? How does someone play violin in the evening, creating beautiful music, after spending the afternoon reviewing reports of mass executions? The answer is that Heydrich, like many Nazis, had completely dehumanized his victims. Jews were stripped of their humanity, reduced to numbers and targets in his mind. Slavs, political opponents, they were not people to him. They were obstacles, problems to be solved, threats to be eliminated. This psychological disconnect allowed him to maintain what appeared to be a normal family life while orchestrating genocide. By 8 o'clock in the morning, Heydrich was at his office, and this is where the true horror of his daily routine began. As head of the Reich Security Main Office, RSHA, Heydrich controlled the Gestapo, the SD, which was the SS intelligence service, and the criminal police. This meant he had oversight of all intelligence gathering, all internal security, and all political repression in Nazi Germany and occupied territories. He was, in effect, the most powerful policeman in the Nazi Empire. His mornings were spent reviewing reports that came in from across Europe. These were not ordinary police reports. They were detailed accounts of arrests, interrogations, executions, and deportations. Heydrich would read through them while drinking coffee, making notes, issuing orders, and planning new operations. He approached this work with the cold efficiency of a corporate executive reviewing quarterly earnings. His products were terror, suffering, and death. What made Heydrich particularly dangerous was his intelligence. He was not just a brute or a fanatic. He had a brilliant mind and used it to create systems of oppression that were terrifyingly effective. He established comprehensive card file systems that tracked political opponents, Jews, and anyone else the Nazis considered enemies. These databases included detailed information about individuals, their families, their associations, and their activities. Each person was categorized and cataloged, making it easy for the Nazis to quickly identify and locate anyone they wanted to arrest. Heydrich also created networks of informants that penetrated every level of society, recruiting neighbors to spy on neighbors, workers to inform on colleagues, even children to report on their parents. He built a system where no one could be trusted, where a careless word could lead to arrest and deportation. This atmosphere of paranoia and fear was one of his greatest weapons. He also pioneered techniques of psychological manipulation and interrogation that went beyond physical torture, breaking people mentally before breaking them physically. By mid-morning, Heydrich would typically be in meetings. He met with Gestapo chiefs, SD officers, and other security officials to coordinate operations. These meetings covered everything from crushing resistance movements in occupied territories to planning the logistics of mass deportations. Heydrich had a reputation for being brilliant but ruthless in these meetings. He would listen to reports, ask penetrating questions, and make decisions with frightening speed and certainty. One of his subordinates later testified that Heydrich never raised his voice but had a way of speaking that made everyone in the room terrified of disappointing him. He expected perfection, efficiency, and absolute obedience. Those who failed him didn't last long. Some were demoted, others were sent to concentration camps, and a few simply disappeared. Everyone around him knew that Heydrich was not someone to cross. But Heydrich wasn't just an administrator. He actively participated in operations. Unlike many high-ranking Nazis who stayed safely behind desks, Heydrich would sometimes go into the field. He flew combat missions as a Luftwaffe pilot on the Eastern Front, not because he had to, but because he wanted to prove his bravery and commitment. He was awarded the Iron Cross for his service. This combination of intellectual brilliance and physical courage made him even more dangerous and earned respect even from those who hated him. Around noon, Heydrich would typically have lunch, often in the officers' mess or sometimes at a restaurant. He enjoyed good food and fine dining, another aspect of his cultivated image as a sophisticated, cultured officer. He could discuss music, art, and philosophy over lunch, then return to his office to sign orders condemning thousands to death. This ability to compartmentalize, to be civilized in one moment and monstrous in the next, was one of his most disturbing characteristics. Heydrich was also an accomplished violinist. He had studied music seriously as a young man and continued to play throughout his life. He would sometimes play violin in the evenings, performing classical pieces with real skill and emotion. He particularly loved chamber music and would occasionally organize small concerts with other musicians. His favorite composers were Mozart and Haydn, and he could perform their works with genuine technical proficiency and emotional depth. Think about that for a moment. A man who spent his days planning genocide would spend his evenings playing beautiful music. He could review reports of mass murders in the afternoon and then pick up his violin in the evening to play a Mozart sonata. It's a reminder that evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like a talented, cultured man in a nice uniform who appreciates fine art and classical music. This is what makes Heydrich so disturbing. He wasn't an ignorant thug. He was educated, cultured, and sophisticated, yet he used all of those qualities in service of absolute evil. But the most horrific aspect of Heydrich's daily routine came in January 1942 when he chaired the Wansee Conference. This was a meeting of senior Nazi officials held at a villa on the shore of Lake Wannsee near Berlin. The purpose was to coordinate the implementation of the final solution to the Jewish question, the systematic murder of every Jew in Europe. Heydrich prepared meticulously for this meeting. He worked with Adolf Eichmann to gather statistics on Jewish populations across Europe, compiling detailed numbers for every country. Their plan encompassed 11 million Jews from Ireland to the Urals. He crafted his presentation carefully, emphasizing the Führer's backing and framing genocide as a necessary security measure, using euphemisms like evacuation and resettlement, even though everyone understood what these words really meant. On January 20th, 1942, he greeted the attendees at the elegant lakeside villa, offering breakfast, coffee, and fine cognac. Then he calmly presented his plan for murdering 11 million people. The meeting lasted only 90 minutes. He laid out the plan, showed statistical breakdowns, and addressed concerns about logistics. There were no moral objections. Just bureaucrats discussing the most efficient methods of mass murder over drinks and pastries. The protocol from the meeting, written in dry bureaucratic language, is one of the most chilling documents in history. After the Wansee Conference, Heydrich's daily routine included overseeing the implementation of the final solution. He received regular reports on the progress of deportations, the capacity of death camps, and the number of people being killed. He reviewed these reports like a chief executive officer reviewing sales figures, praising efficiency and demanding improvements where the killing was not proceeding fast enough. By late 1941, Heydrich had been appointed as acting Reich protector of Bohemia and Moravia, essentially the Nazi ruler of occupied Czechoslovakia. He split his time between Berlin and Prague, managing both the overall security apparatus of the Reich and the occupation of Czechoslovakia. In Prague, he arrived in September 1941 and immediately launched a campaign of terror. Within weeks, thousands were arrested and hundreds executed, including Czech Prime Minister Alois Elias. He declared martial law and unleashed the Gestapo on anyone suspected of resistance, but his strategy was more sophisticated than simple terror. After the initial wave had cowed the population, he implemented a carrot and stick approach. He increased food rations for Czech workers, raised wages, and improved social benefits. This wasn't kindness, but calculated strategy. A well-fed worker was more productive and less likely to rebel. His afternoons involved official functions, factory inspections, and meetings with Czech collaborators. He was building a model occupation that combined terror with efficiency, and it was working. Production increased, and resistance decreased. This success made him overconfident. Despite being one of the most hated men in Europe, Heydrich began to relax his security. He rode through Prague in an open car without guards, believing that he had broken the will of the Czech people. This would prove to be a fatal miscalculation. What most people don't know about Heydrich is that he was being considered as a potential successor to Hitler. He was young, just 38 years old at the height of his power. He was brilliant, effective, and absolutely loyal to Nazi ideology. Some historians believe that if Heydrich had lived, he might have eventually replaced Hitler as Führer. And that's a truly terrifying thought because Heydrich was in many ways more dangerous than Hitler. He was more intelligent, more organized, and possibly even more ruthless. Heydrich's evenings varied depending on where he was and what was happening. Sometimes he attended official functions and parties where he would mingle with other Nazi officials and present himself as charming and sophisticated. Other times he would stay home with his family, playing with his children and maintaining the facade of normalcy. And sometimes he would work late into the night, reviewing reports and planning operations. He was also known to enjoy fencing. He had been a competitive fencer in his youth and continued to practice. It fit his self-image as a warrior, and he was an athlete. He liked activities that demonstrated physical prowess and discipline. Everything about Heydrich was calculated to project an image of the perfect Nazi, strong, smart, cultured, and absolutely committed to the cause. But on May 27, 1942, Heydrich's carefully constructed life came to a violent end. That morning started like any other. He had breakfast with his family at his residence in Panenska Brezhny, a village outside Prague. He put on his uniform, kissed his wife and children goodbye, and got into his Mercedes convertible for the drive to Prague Castle where his office was located. His driver, SS Oberscharführer Johannes Klein, was at the wheel. The car was open-topped, and Heydrich sat in the front passenger seat, as was his habit. What Heydrich did not know was that two Czech resistance fighters, Josef Gabčík and Jan Kubis, had been waiting for him. They were part of a team of Czech and Slovak soldiers who had been trained by the British Special Operations Executive and parachuted into Czechoslovakia in December 1941. Their mission, codenamed Operation Anthropoid, had one goal: kill Reinhard Heydrich. The assassination team had been planning for months, gathering intelligence on Heydrich's movements and looking for the perfect opportunity. They learned that Heydrich traveled the same route from his residence to Prague Castle every day, and they identified a hairpin turn in the Holsovec district where his car would have to slow down. This is where they decided to strike. On that Wednesday morning, Gabčík and Kubis took their positions near the turn. A third member of their team, Josef Valsik, was stationed further up the road to signal when Heydrich's car was approaching. Two other team members were positioned as lookouts. At approximately 10:30 in the morning, Valsik gave the signal. Heydrich's car was coming. As the Mercedes slowed to navigate the hairpin turn, Gabčík stepped into the road and aimed his Sten submachine gun at Heydrich. He pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. The gun jammed. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Heydrich and his driver saw the attacker. Instead of ordering Klein to speed away, Heydrich stood up in the car and reached for his pistol. He was going to shoot back. It was an incredibly brave but foolish decision. Kubis, seeing that Gabčík's gun had failed, ran forward and threw a modified anti-tank grenade at the car. The grenade exploded against the rear wheel, sending shrapnel and fragments of the car's interior into Heydrich's body. The blast also injured Kubis himself, but he managed to escape on a bicycle. Heydrich was wounded but still alive and conscious. He got out of the car and actually tried to chase the attackers, firing his pistol at them before collapsing. Klein, the driver, chased Gabčík, but the Czech soldier escaped. A passing truck driver, unaware of who Heydrich was, stopped to help the wounded man and drove him to a hospital. Heydrich was taken to Bulovka Hospital in Prague. The bomb had driven fragments of metal, upholstery, and pieces of his uniform deep into his body, damaging his diaphragm, spleen, and lung. He underwent surgery, and initially doctors thought he might survive. Hitler sent his personal physician, but infection set in from bacteria carried by the horsehair upholstery. In an era before widely available antibiotics, these infections were often fatal. On June 4, 1942, 8 days after the attack, Reinhard Heydrich died. He was 38 years old. His death sparked massive Nazi reprisals. Hitler demanded that the Czech people pay in blood. The most infamous reprisal was the complete destruction of the village of Lidice. On June 10, 1942, every man and boy over 15 was shot, 173 males in total. The 184 women were sent to Ravensbrück concentration camp where most died. The 82 children who did not look Aryan enough were gassed at Chelmno. The village was burned and bulldozed, erased from the map. Another village, Lazaki, met the same fate. Overall, the Nazis killed over 1,300 Czech civilians in direct reprisal for Heydrich's assassination. Hitler was reportedly devastated by Heydrich's death. He called him the man with the iron heart and held him up as a model of Nazi virtue. Himmler called him irreplaceable and said that Germany had lost one of its best and most fearless men. The massive state funeral in Berlin was one of the largest Nazi ceremonies of the war. Heydrich was buried with full honors, celebrated as a martyr to the Nazi cause. But the truth is more complicated. While many top Nazis genuinely mourned Heydrich, others were probably secretly relieved. Heydrich had files on everyone. He knew everyone's secrets, their indiscretions, their vulnerabilities. He used this information to maintain power and eliminate rivals. With Heydrich gone, many Nazi officials no longer had to worry about their secrets being used against them. So what did Reinhard Heydrich actually do all day? He woke early, exercised to maintain his perfect Aryan physique, had breakfast with his family, and went to work orchestrating genocide. He read reports about mass murders over his morning coffee. He chaired meetings about the logistics of killing millions. He played violin in the evenings and tucked his children into bed. He was brilliant, efficient, cultured, and absolutely monstrous. Heydrich represents something particularly disturbing about the Nazi regime. He wasn't a raving lunatic or an obvious monster. He was intelligent, talented, and capable of great charm. He could have been a successful businessman, military officer, or government official in any normal society, but he chose to use his considerable talents in service of absolute evil, and he did it without apparent guilt or hesitation. He also represents the danger of intelligence without morality, of efficiency without conscience. The more capable and organized a person is, the more dangerous they become if they lack basic human empathy. Heydrich could organize mass murder with the same cool efficiency that another person might organize a business or run a charity. The skills are the same. The moral framework makes all the difference. What makes Heydrich particularly terrifying to study is he represents a type of evil that is more common than we would like to admit. He was not insane. He was not driven by uncontrollable rage or obvious sadism. He was rational, calculating, and methodical. He made career decisions, sought advancement, wanted respect from his peers, and took pride in doing his job well. The problem was that his job was genocide, and he never questioned whether that job was morally acceptable. He simply did it to the best of his considerable abilities. This is the true horror of the Holocaust and the Nazi regime. It was not carried out primarily by raving lunatics or obvious monsters. It was carried out by competent professionals like Heydrich, who treated mass murder as a career opportunity, who brought their intelligence and organizational skills to bear on the logistics of genocide, who went home to their families each night feeling satisfied with a job well done. Understanding this is crucial because it means that evil of this magnitude does not require extraordinary villains. It just requires ordinary people willing to check their conscience at the door. His story is also a reminder that evil often hides behind a normal facade. The man who orchestrated genocide went home to his family each night. The architect of the Holocaust played beautiful music on his violin. The mastermind of terror smiled at parties and charmed his colleagues. Evil does not always announce itself. Sometimes it wears a nice uniform, speaks politely, and pretends to be just another person doing their job. The assassination of Heydrich was one of the few successful operations against a top Nazi official during the war. The men who killed him, Josef Gabčík and Jan Kubis, became heroes to the Czech resistance, even though they died shortly after the assassination when they were betrayed and cornered by Nazi forces. They knew it was a suicide mission. They knew the reprisals would be terrible, but they did it anyway because they understood that Heydrich was too dangerous to be allowed to live. After the attack, Gabčík, Kubis, and 5 other members of the Czech resistance hid in the crypt of the Church of Saints Cyril and Methodius in Prague. They were betrayed by another resistance member who broke under Gestapo torture and revealed their location. On June 18, 1942, over 700 SS soldiers surrounded the church. The resistance fighters refused to surrender. The battle lasted for hours. The Nazis tried everything to force the men out of the crypt. They threw grenades down. They tried to flood the crypt. They brought in the Prague fire brigade to pump water in. The resistance fighters, trapped in the flooding crypt with no chance of escape, fought until they ran out of ammunition. Rather than be captured, they used their last bullets on themselves. Göring and Goebbels, along with their comrades, died fighting. They denied the Nazis the satisfaction of capturing them alive and the propaganda victory of a public trial. Their sacrifice was not in vain, though the cost was terrible. The assassination of Heydrich sent a powerful message to the world that the Nazis were not invincible and that even their most powerful leaders could be reached and killed. It boosted morale in occupied territories and proved that resistance was possible. The British government initially considered the mission a disaster because of the massive reprisals, but history has judged it differently. Removing Heydrich from power prevented him from implementing even more evil policies, and possibly from rising to become Führer. What is perhaps most chilling about Heydrich is that we will never know what he might have become if he had lived. At 38, he was just entering what should have been the prime of his career. If Germany had won the war, or even if the war had lasted longer, Heydrich might have risen even higher. He might have become Führer. He might have implemented even more horrific policies. His death, while tragic for the innocent people who died in reprisal, may have prevented even greater evils. What do you think? Was Reinhard Heydrich the most dangerous Nazi of them all? Could someone that intelligent and organized truly believe in the evil he was doing, or was it all calculated ambition?